Hello, I'm Yash. I'm a final year medical student, and today I'm going to show you how I can study for 24 hours straight. So let's get into it. Number one, you have to ask yourself, why are you studying? Are you studying out of personal interest? Are you studying for an exam? Are you studying for an upcoming test? Do you have an assignment due in a week's time? Do you have a presentation due very soon? That is going to guide how you're going to actually be structuring your learning, right? The level of pressure that is behind your motivation for actually studying for this long is going to dictate what level of concentration you need whilst you're actually studying. In fact, there could be a significant amount of stress going on once you're studying for an exam that is in, let's say, 2 days, and you have only 24 hours to prepare for it. It's very important for you to understand what it is that you're studying for. Are you studying for interest? Are you studying for an exam? Are you studying for a test? Are you studying for personal reasons, or are you studying for academic reasons? Okay, so that's rule number one. Rule number two, it's extremely important that your setting where you're doing all of your study is properly managed. This means that the area that you're studying in is up to your liking. It has to be clean, neat, so that you can actually try and be as productive as you can. It's very difficult to study in an area that is very dirty. If there's lots of papers all over the place, it just sends subconscious signals to your brain to just say, nah, I don't want to study. However, if your area is neat and clean, nicely sort of like inviting you to come and sit down and study, that kind of sends subconscious signals to your brain to come and study. And you're going to be more productive in an area which is set up nicely, well lit, and nice and clean than an area that is not. So that is rule number two. More things I would like to rule number two is the fact that you need to modulate where and when you're studying. It's extremely important that you're studying away from distraction. Most of us, we have families around, okay? So you will often be interrupted. You will often have people barge into your study room, barge into when you're studying, harass you, hamper you, and do lots of things. That's going to cause issues. In my case, for example, I am extremely sensitive to distraction. I can't tolerate a whole lot of people coming in and barging into my study sessions. It's extremely annoying to me. Because of that, what I like to do is I like to actually study at night. So you'll find that a lot of my study logs are at night. Okay, so the reason of that is just that that's when everyone is asleep. I can actually study peacefully. I have no distractions. Everything is just pin drop silence, exactly how I like it. Talking about distractions, it's extremely important for you guys to make sure your distractions are as minimal as possible. Okay, you've only got so long to study, and if every 5 minutes you're getting some clue or you're getting some kind of a prompt to go and check your Facebook, to go and check your Instagram, to go and check this, to go and check that, it's not a good idea to be keeping that source of that prompt around you. So I like to put my phone in airplane mode whenever I can, whenever I'm studying, and only activate Wi-Fi if I really need to use my phone to look something up. Most of the time that's not the case because I have a computer available to me to do that, but my phone usually is switched off or on airplane mode when I'm studying. That's rule number two. Moving on to the third thing that I like to sort of hammer on when it comes to studying for extended periods of time is your motivation. Why are you studying? That kind of ties into the first prompt that I was talking about, which is why are you studying, right? I think it's the exact same thing. But you have to understand that the motivation behind your study is going to dictate what degree of concentration you're actually going to be providing whatever it is that is in front of you. It could be a research article, it could be a book, it could be a novel, it could be maybe preparing next week's presentation, it could be an exam, it could be whatever. It's extremely important to understand what it is that is motivating you to actually sit down for extended periods of time and study. Now, I like to divide these into two major categories. First of all, you've got the categories of intrinsic motivation, okay? Intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation is motivation that comes from within you. So this is your own sort of personal curiosity, your own personal wish to seek answers. This is extremely, extremely strong. It is actually the strongest source of motivation. Okay? How many of you have ever been on Wikipedia where you came across an interesting thing? When I was younger, I used to look up dinosaurs, for example, and overnight, you've gone through so many Wikipedia articles, right? You've gone through so many Wikipedia articles, you've gone through so many YouTube videos, you've gone through so many research articles that all of a sudden you're basically a pro-paleontologist at this point. You've become an expert on dinosaurs overnight. That is the level of concentration that comes from within. That is when you yourself are allowing your own inner drive to dictate what it is you're learning. And I personally think that if you can somehow manage to make your study into an internal source of motivation, it is going to be very helpful because your concentration levels would be at their absolute maximum. Moving on to external sources of motivation. Okay, so external sources of motivation could include things like guilt. I have to get this done, otherwise my boss will be cross with me. I have to get this done, otherwise the lecturer is not going to be happy. I have to get this done because I won't get a pass mark. I have to get this done, otherwise my degree is not going to be complete. So these are external factors which are dictating your motivation. You're allowing these external factors to assign your motivation to you. Okay, these are strongish. They can be quite strong, but compared to your internal motivation, these are very, very weak. In fact, you'll often find yourself burning out. You'll often find yourself getting bored. You'll find yourself just outright not willing to continue with what you're doing after, let's say, an hour or 2 hours of studying that thing. You will just want to get up and go do something else. That's because you're forcing your inner self to do something that it doesn't want to do. And our body is very reluctant to do something it's not wanting to do, which is why psychiatry and psychology is a thing. So if possible, if you can internalize your source of motivation, it will be highly beneficial to you. And then you can study for 10 hours, 15 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever it pleases. Okay? So that's my rule number. Moving on to rule number 4. It's extremely important for you guys to understand the scope of what it is that you want to cover during your study period, okay? For me, I'm a medical student. Therefore, the scope of what I need to cover in my study period is usually quite vast. It's not just vast, it's also extremely detailed. So as medical students, you guys probably know we need to have a very broad breadth of knowledge and very deep depth of knowledge on different topics and different conditions and things like that, because we are somehow condensing how the entire human body functions, which is years worth of data within a 4 or 5 year medical course. And it's just not possible to sort of take your time with that. So usually our learning tends to be very, 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 very sort of strategic and sort of concentrated. So when you're looking at the scope of what you're learning, it's important to divide it into whether you need to learn one thing in lots of detail or you need to learn lots of things in not so much detail. And that's going to actually allow you to concentrate a lot better. Because if you need to learn one thing in lots of detail, you can just sort of focus on one thing and sort of build a framework around it. So for example, like you're building a puzzle. Are puzzles still a thing too nowadays? I don't think people play with puzzles anymore. But when I used to play with puzzles back in the day, I'm 23, so does that make me old? Does that mean I'm old? I'm probably old. Anyway, I'm 23, I used to play with puzzles. Call me old. Yeah, whatever. I used to start with the edges and the corners and then work my way in. And as you do with puzzles, as you work your way in, the picture becomes clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer, right? So how can you use that analogy to improve your own learning yourself? So when I said edges and corners, you can use the edges and corners as the things that you already know. For example, if you already know the basic definition of something or you know sort of how things work, you can use that as a framework to sort of work your way into the detail. That will allow you to sort of understand where you're going and give you an overall framework that you could use to really learn the thing properly. Okay? Otherwise, what can happen is if you have to learn one thing in a lot of detail and you sort of just jump in page first. For example, if you were to take a book and just read from the first page onward, very often than not, you'll find yourself lost because you won't be sure about what's going on. Many of the time, you'll be seeing information for the first time. And when you see information for the first time, you don't understand the information. Very often than not, in my opinion, it takes at least 3 or 4 readings of a piece of information to understand it properly before you can just move on, okay? So this is why I do my study in a tiered system. You guys can look it up. It's on my channel somewhere. I think I just posted it recently of how I study and the tiered system that I use. That allows you to really understand. It gives you a framework to work towards, okay? Now moving on to the second part, which is breadth of study, right? So you may have, let's say, an entire organ system to cover, for if I'm using a medical analogy, for example. In that case, it's probably better to group the different components of that particular study together and study based on the groupings, okay? For example, if I were to divide the gastrointestinal system for studying, I would divide it into the different parts all the way from the mouth to the anus. Every single different functional part of the gastrointestinal system would be a topic on its own. For example, I would use the mouth and the pharynx as one system. I'd use the esophagus as the second system. The stomach would be the next system. Then I would go into the small intestines, which would be the next system. The hepatobiliary system, which would be the next system. The large intestines, which would be the next system. The rectum and the anus being the final system that I would cover, okay? That allows me to frame everything and sort of tie everything in a conceptual manner. Because if you try to learn everything, if you learn gastrointestinal anatomy of everything all at once, you won't be able to tie that information with gastrointestinal physiology of everything all at once. If you do it from chunks, it will allow you to really understand everything properly and retain a lot more of it than you would have otherwise. So that's the other thing. If you want to learn one thing in lots of detail, find out the things you already know about it and work your way in from there. Or if you have to learn a lot of things in not so much detail, group them into little grouplets that you can approach in a systematic manner in order to understand the entire picture as a whole later on without getting lost. So that was my rule number 4. Now moving on to rule number 5. Okay, so this is the most important one, okay? Take breaks. Take breaks. It's very important to take breaks. Your brain literally cannot process 24 hours worth of information being bombarded at it at once. In fact, if you do that, you'll often find yourself pretty much not retaining anything whatsoever. This is why studying for 24 hours usually is not recommended. I don't recommend it myself. I've done it many times. Obviously, I see the point of it. I see why people do it. But it's not recommended. In fact, if you were to study this 24-hour worth of content over 3 days of 8-hour blocks, you will retain more in the 3 days of 8-hour blocks than you would in the 24 hours at once. But sadly, we all don't have the luxury of 3 days with 8-hour blocks of study in front of us, so I completely understand. So coming back to the whole point of taking breaks, it's very important for you guys to take breaks. And one of the ways to take breaks is the Pomodoro Method. I'm a huge advocate of the Pomodoro Method of learning. The Pomodoro Method pretty much is studying or concentrating on any task for X amount of time and then taking a fixed break. Okay? The common time durations for Pomodoros tend to be around 25 minutes of concentration followed by 5 minutes of break. 25 minutes of concentration followed by 5 minutes of break. So that allows you to sort of break down the content you're learning into little chunks which align with your attention span. Not everyone has a very long attention span, which is why very often the classes that we take in high school and university feel like we haven't learned anything, because they often are like 2 or 3 hours long and they often go on forever. So most of us zone out within the first half an hour to an hour, and everything on top of that is just sort of flying on top of our head. So having that ability to take a break, using a Pomodoro method is highly beneficial, and I highly recommend. My Pomodoros that I use are 45-15, so I will study for 45 minutes and I will take a 15-minute break. During the 15-minute break, I will actually hop on the treadmill and walk for 10 minutes. This increases the amount of blood flow going to your brain, which I believe is going to improve the quality of synapses I'm forming between my neurons, so I'm more likely to retain that information. Yeah, exercise helps. If you can do exercise, that's a good idea. This is a very good way if you want to do it. I've done it, and if you guys want to see me actually do it, I've actually done multiple Pomodoro sessions and they are on my channel. I've done, I think, an 8-hour session as well that you guys can go through, where I actually study for 45 minutes, to concentrate for 45 minutes. Then I do 15 minutes of break, within which I do 10 minutes of walking, some push-ups. So that's very important. Take breaks. Without breaks, your brain is not going to function properly. It's going to be overloaded with information, and when your brain is overloaded, it just ignores everything else that's coming at it. Okay? Very important. This is why you also need to sleep, because when you sleep, this is when your brain forms the strong neural connections between the neurons, which end up forming your memories. Which is why if someone hasn't slept for a long period of time, they don't form memories quite so. So that was point number 5. Point number 6. Please don't study for 24 hours. Please, please, please don't study for 24 hours. It's not a good idea. Very good idea to plan your studies so that you don't have to get to the point of having to study for 24 hours. Try not to study for 24 hours. Try to plan your study in such a way that you can get smaller chunks of time over a longer period of time, because the synapses you're going to form by dedicating your study to small chunks over a long period of time are just going to be of such higher quality. You're just going to be better off. Do you know why the gunner in your class does so well? It's because the gunner in your class is studying over a long time. He's not studying for a long time, two minutes before the test, right? That's the reason why the topper tops. The topper has a good study ethic. So that's why I would say that you guys should probably try and develop a study schedule, of course. And by using the previous points I've mentioned before, if you can design a study schedule that works for you, kudos. And I'm pretty sure that will be enough to help you master the content in a reasonable. I hope this was a useful video for you guys. I'm trying something new out. I've just got this new lens. It's a Canon Nifty 50. It's a Canon 50mm 1.8 lens, and I'm a bit far away from the thing, so I don't know what the sound sounds like. So let me know in the comments what you guys think of this new video style of everything being blurred around me and looking a bit science fiction. Okay, leave a like, subscribe. I make more productivity and medicine related videos and other things as well, but I haven't quite started them yet, so it's probably not a good idea to claim them. But I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.